You ever wondered how the Yankees became a dynasty or how the Red Sox cursed themselves for 86 years? Buckle up, baseball fans. We're diving into the trades that literally broke the universe. The curse of the Bambino. Let's start with a trade that has main character energy across the entire MLB timeline. The sale of Babe Ruth from the Boston Red Sox to the New York Yankees in 1920. This wasn't just a trade. This was the baseball equivalent of selling your winning lottery ticket for gas money. Red Sox owner Harry Frazee was in a financial pickle and needed cash to fund his Broadway play, No No Nanette. So what did he do? Sold the greatest baseball player on the planet for $100,000 and a $300,000 loan. In today's money, that's around $5 million, or what modern MLB teams spend on clubhouse snacks. The Yankees, who had never won a World Series, suddenly had the game's biggest star. Ruth went on to become the moment, hitting 54 home runs in his first year with the Yankees, more than any entire MLB team that season except the Phillies. Meanwhile, the Red Sox entered an 86-year championship drought that became known as the curse of the Bambino. The absolute chaotic energy of this deal cannot be overstated. Imagine if the Lakers had sold LeBron for cash to fund a movie, or if the Chiefs traded Patrick Mahomes to cover some concert tickets. That's the level of galaxy brain decision-making we're talking about. The trade single-handedly transformed the Yankees into the dynasty we know today and turned the Red Sox into baseball's main character for all the wrong reasons. The Bagwell blunder. Next up is a textbook fumbled-the-bag moment. Then the Boston Red Sox traded prospect Jeff Bagwell to the Houston Astros for relief pitcher Larry Anderson in 1990. Talk about a vibe check failing spectacularly. The Red Sox were in a pennant race and needed bullpen help. Anderson was solid, posting a 1.23 ERA in 22 games for Boston. The problem? He left as a free agent that winter. Meanwhile, Bagwell went on to become one of the greatest first basemen in MLB history, winning an MVP, making 4 All-Star teams, and putting up Hall of Fame numbers over 15 seasons with the Astros. The core issue? Boston had Wade Boggs at third base and didn't think Bagwell could play first. The Astros immediately converted him to first base, where he thrived. This is peak "we didn't pass the assignment" energy from the Red Sox front office. What makes this trade hit different is that Bagwell was from Boston and grew up a Red Sox fan. The team literally traded away a hometown hero who would have given anything to play for them. Instead, he became the face of the Astros franchise. The trade remains one of those what-if scenarios that still keeps Red Sox executives up at night. The Cologne catastrophe. In 2002, the Montreal Expos decided to go all in for a playoff push and traded 3 prospects to Cleveland for ace pitcher Bartolo Colon. On paper, not the worst idea, except those 3 prospects were Grady Sizemore, Cliff Lee, and Brandon Phillips. This trade is absolutely giving selling your house to buy a nice dinner energy. Colon pitched well for the Expos, 10-4 with a 3.31 ERA, but the team missed the playoffs anyway, and he was traded to the White Sox the following year. Meanwhile, Cleveland absolutely secured the bag. Sizemore became a 4-time All-Star who looked like a future Hall of Famer before injuries derailed his career. Cliff Lee won a Cy Young Award and became one of the best pitchers in baseball. Brandon Phillips developed into a 4-time Gold Glove winner and 3-time All-Star. The Expos front office was clearly in YOLO mode since the team was on the verge of relocating. They became the Washington Nationals in 2005. But giving up 3 future stars for a rental pitcher? That's the definition of a poverty franchise move. No wonder they couldn't stay in Montreal with decision-making like that. What's really chef's kiss about this whole situation is that MLB owned the Expos at the time. That's right, the league was running the team. So this wasn't even a case of a desperate owner making a bad call. This was the league office approving a trade that would haunt the franchise for years. The Tigers finessed the Marlins. Sometimes a trade is so one-sided it feels like someone must have had blackmail material. That's exactly the vibe of the 2007 blockbuster that sent Miguel Cabrera and Dontrelle Willis from the Marlins to the Tigers for 6 prospects. None of those prospects panned out for Miami, not a single one. Cameron Maybin bounced around the league. Andrew Miller eventually became an elite reliever, but not until long after leaving Miami, and other 4 guys essentially vanished into baseball obscurity. Meanwhile, Cabrera became baseball royalty in Detroit, winning a Triple Crown, the first since 1967, 2 MVPs and 4 batting titles while hitting almost 500 home runs for the Tigers. This is the baseball equivalent of trading a Lamborghini for 6 lottery tickets and all of them being losers. The Marlins were in full financial reset mode, but even by their standards of fire sales, this was brutal. The prospects they got all eventually had decent careers, just not with Miami. What makes this trade hit different is that the Marlins actually knew Cabrera was special. This wasn't a case of missing on talent evaluation. It was purely a business decision that aged like milk. Detroit saw their window and said it's giving championship opportunity, while the Marlins were giving we don't want to pay anyone ever energy. The Rangers highway robbery. In 1989, the Texas Rangers pulled off what can only be described as grand larceny when they traded Sammy Sosa and Wilson Alvarez to the White Sox for Harold Baines and Fred Manrique. Baines was a good player, no doubt, but this trade aged about as well as flip phones. Sosa went on to become one of the most prolific home run hitters in baseball history, while Alvarez had a solid career as a starting pitcher. The Rangers essentially traded away a future superstar for a designated hitter in his 30s. What makes this trade even more chaotic is that the Rangers traded Baines away just a year later. The whole sequence gives major didn't think this through vibes. To make matters worse, the White Sox later traded Sosa to the Cubs, where he became an icon during the historic home run chase of 1998. The only saving grace, Rangers owner George W. Bush approved the trade, and he later became president of the United States. So at least his career recovered from this blunder. To be fair to the Rangers, Sosa was extremely raw when they traded him, hitting just .238 with limited power in his brief time with Texas. Nobody could have predicted he'd become a 60-plus home run hitter who would go toe-to-toe with Mark McGwire in the summer of '98, changing baseball forever. The Cardinals' Cardinal sin. In 1964, the St. Louis Cardinals traded pitcher Ernie Broglio to the Chicago Cubs for outfielder Lou Brock in what became one of the most lopsided deals in baseball history. At the time, many thought the Cardinals were getting fleeced. Broglio was coming off an 18-8 season with a .299 ERA, while Brock was struggling with a .251 batting average. The Chicago press even called it Brock for Broglio. Cardinals get rooked. Plot twist. Brock immediately turned into a superstar for St. Louis, helping them win the World Series that very season. He went on to steal 938 bases for the Cardinals and get 3,000 hits, becoming a Hall of Famer. Meanwhile, Broglio developed arm problems and won only 7 more games in his career after the trade. This trade is giving major don't judge a book by its cover energy. The Cardinals saw something in Brock that others missed, and their faith in his potential paid off in the most spectacular way. It's now considered one of the most lopsided trades in sports history, and Cubs fans still get triggered when anyone mentions Brock's name. What this trade really teaches us is the value of player development and understanding context. The Cardinals recognized that Brock's skills, his elite speed and athleticism, would work better in their system and their ballpark than they did at Wrigley Field. They also suspected Broglio's arm troubles might be worse than the Cubs realized. The Blue Jays' Christmas miracle. On December 5th, 1990, the Toronto Blue Jays pulled off a heist that would make Ocean's 11 jealous when they traded Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez to the Padres for Roberto Alomar and Joe Carter. This trade hits different because both teams actually got talent, but the Blue Jays received the 2 players who would help them win back-to-back World Series in 1992 and 93. Alomar became a Hall of Famer, and Carter hit one of the most iconic home runs in baseball history to win the 1993 World Series. The Padres got 2 All-Stars in McGriff and Fernandez, but neither led them to playoff success. The trade feels like when someone trades you regular Pokemon cards, but keeps all the holographic ones for themselves. The real galaxy brain element here is that the Blue Jays recognized they needed to shake up their core after playoff disappointments, even though they were trading away fan favorites. They sacrificed good vibes for great results, and it worked. This trade single-handedly transformed them from postseason chokers to World Series champions. This cultural impact of this trade cannot be overstated for Canadian baseball. Joe Carter's walk-off home run in the 1993 World Series remains the single most iconic moment in Blue Jays history, with Tom Cheek's legendary call, "Touch 'em all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life." Carter was jumping up and down as he rounded the bases, and all of Canada was jumping with him. The Braves' short-term thinking. The 1987 trade that sent John Smoltz from the Detroit Tigers to the Atlanta Braves for Doyle Alexander might be the ultimate short-term versus long-term cautionary tale. To be fair to Detroit, they got exactly what they wanted initially. Alexander went 9-0 with a 1.53 ERA down the stretch, helping the Tigers win the division. Mission accomplished, right? Well, Smoltz went on to become a Hall of Famer with the Braves, winning a Cy Young Award and becoming a cornerstone of their dynasty that won 14 straight division titles. He ended his career with 213 wins, 154 saves, and 3,084 strikeouts. The Tigers essentially traded away a Ferrari for a rental car. This trade is a peak living-in-the-moment energy from the Tigers. The Braves were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Atlanta saw the potential in a struggling minor leaguer and built their dynasty around him, while Detroit was focused solely on immediate success. The irony? The Tigers lost in the ALCS that year anyway. All that short-term thinking, and they still didn't even make the World Series. What's wild about this trade is that Smoltz wasn't even considered a can't-miss prospect at the time. He had a 5.73 ERA in Double-A when the Braves acquired him. The Tigers couldn't see past the struggles to recognize his electric arm and competitive mentality. The Oakland A's fumble. In 2014, the Oakland A's were all in for a World Series run when they traded Yoenis Cespedes to the Boston Red Sox for John Lester and Johnny Gomes. On paper, Trading an outfielder for an ace pitcher when you're in contention makes sense. The problem? The A's completely fell apart after the trade. They had the best record in baseball before the deal, but collapsed down the stretch. They barely made the playoffs and then lost the wildcard game to the Royals with Lester on the mound. This trade is giving major mess with the vibes energy. Cespedes was the heart and soul of that A's team, and his departure clearly affected team chemistry. Despite analytics suggesting the trade made baseball sense, it failed the immaculate vibes check. The A's went from World Series favorites to one and done in the playoffs. What's even more painful for A's fans is that both players bounced quickly. Lester signed with the Cubs that offseason, while Boston flipped Cespedes to the Tigers. All that disruption for a rental pitcher who couldn't even win the one playoff game they reached. This trade represents the classic conflict between analytics and intangibles in baseball decision-making. On paper, the A's were upgrading. Ace pitchers traditionally impact playoff success more than corner outfielders. But baseball isn't played on paper. Cespedes brought an energy and confidence to the A's that couldn't be quantified in a spreadsheet. The Cincy Steal. In 1971, the Cincinnati Reds traded away Lee May, Tommy Helms, and Jimmy Stewart to the Houston Astros for Joe Morgan, Cesar Geronimo, and Jack Billingham, Dennis Menke, and Ed Armbrister in what became known as the Joe Morgan trade. This was the ultimate seeing the future move. The Reds recognized they needed to get more athletic and focused on Morgan, who was coming off a down year in Houston. All Morgan did after the trade was win back-to-back MVP awards and help create the Big Red Machine dynasty that won 2 World Series. What makes this trade absolutely chef's kiss perfect is how the Reds used the deal to transform their entire team identity. They moved Pete Rose to third base to make room for Morgan at second, creating one of the greatest infields ever. They added 2 key pieces to their outfield and pitching staff from the same trade. The Astros got good players in return, but the Reds built a dynasty with their haul. This is the baseball equivalent of trading a good smartphone for 5 better devices. The Reds absolutely understood the assignment. The architect of this trade, Bob Howsam, deserves a special shout-out for his vision. He didn't just see players, he saw a complete team philosophy. The Reds before this trade were known as the Big Red Machine because of their power hitting. But they were too one-dimensional. Howsam wanted speed, defense, and versatility. Morgan brought all those elements plus an elite batting eye that led to sky-high on-base percentages. Modern madness. While those historic trades are wild, modern MLB has given us some equally chaotic energy. The Mookie Betts trade from Boston to LA still has Red Sox fans in therapy. Trading away a homegrown MVP in his prime for financial flexibility, that's peak we don't want nice things energy from Red Sox ownership. The Betts situation is particularly painful because it wasn't about talent evaluation. Everyone knew he was elite. It was purely a financial decision, with Boston deciding they didn't want to pay market value for a franchise player. The Dodgers immediately signed him to a massive extension, and he helped win the World Series in the first season. Or how about when the Marlins cleaned house in 2007-2018, trading away Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich, Marcelo Zuna, and JT Realmuto in separate deals? Imagine having 4 All-Stars and deciding, we're good. It's Marlins baseball for you. The Yelich trade looks particularly atrocious in hindsight, as he immediately won NL MVP with the Brewers, while none of the prospects Miami received made significant impacts. We also can't forget about the infamous Chris Archer trade, where the Pirates gave up Tyler Glasnow, Austin Meadows, and Shane Baz to the Rays for what turned out to be a rapidly declining pitcher. Archer had been showing warning signs before the trade, but Pittsburgh ignored them and paid a premium prospect price. Glasnow developed into an ace, Meadows became an all-star, and Baz remains a top pitching prospect. The real lesson from all these trades is that baseball executives are just like us, making impulsive decisions, missing obvious red flags, and occasionally striking gold by accident. Even with all the advanced analytics and scouting today, teams still make trades that age about as well as milk left out in the Arizona summer. Don't let these trade takes disappear like the Expos. Smash that subscribe button, drop your hottest trade opinions below, and turn on notifications so you never miss our baseball content.